So you just gonna let your woman and her daughter leave with some rando who pulled up to your crib that you don't recognize as a family or a friend and let them just ride off? Hey y'all, welcome and or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. So we're just gonna be jumping right into the case today. And today's case takes place on July 4th, 1995 in Wayne City, Illinois, which is a pretty small rural place. Y'all know the types, one where people don't lock their doors, everybody knows everybody, very small population, safe, you know, a place where not too much be going on. And in Wayne City, the 4th of July is a pretty big deal. They decorate the city, they have a parade, they have a fireworks show, families get together and have barbecues. You know, y'all know it's a small town celebration for the 4th of July. And the Marshall family was one of those families who got together every single year to have a big family barbecue. And this year in 1995, two of the regulars who be there every single year and who said that they was gonna be there this year didn't show up. And that was Sue Marshall and her 13-year-old daughter Melinda. Now, like I said, they had already told their whole family that they was gonna be there. They was making plans. You know, Melinda and her cousin was making plans. Y'all know how y'all make plans to meet your favorite cousin at your grandma's house? Something like that. So naturally at the barbecue, everybody looking around like, where's Sue and Melinda? And they thought it was a little bit strange that they didn't show up because it wasn't like them to not be there. But at the end of the day, maybe Sue had some other plans that she just didn't tell somebody about, or maybe she had come up on some last minute plans they didn't know. So while it was strange and they was kind of worried about it, the family didn't think too much of it. But then the next day on July 5th, the family got a call from the Wayne County Police. So basically earlier that morning, the Wayne County Police got a call saying that there was a car that was in a pond. So the deputies went out to the pond and found a late 80s Oldsmobile that was partially submerged in the water. Like, it was, the front was in, the back was out. So the deputies walking around the car, because the car not deep in the water at all, and he pretty much is trying to get a general overview and trying to see what's going on with this car, because at his initial glance it kind of looked like somebody was trying to steal the car and then like maybe ran it off the road and then left and ditched it. So as he's walking around the car, he notices that on the bumper there's like a little smudge of blood, right? But as he makes his way to the front of the car and look inside, he notices that there is a lot of blood on the floor of this car. And it's not a little bit, it's a lot. It looked like somebody might have poured a gallon of blood on this floor. And he knew right away that his police department was not equipped to handle this, because this is little bitty old Wayne City. The Wayne County Police Department ain't never seen nothing like this. So what they ended up doing was calling in the Illinois State Police so that they could help them process the scene, take pictures, and conduct an investigation that their police force was equipped to deal with, right? So once the Illinois State Police got there, they removed the car from the water and started to collect more evidence. So they ended up finding some type of wood plank-like thing that was wedged in between the driver's seat and the gas pedal. And what it looked like was that this piece of wood was used to hold down the gas pedal so that the car would drive itself into the lake. But the car ended up getting stuck instead of going all the way into the pond as it was intended to do. They also found two .32 caliber shell casings, which apparently is a rare caliber of gun to have. Apparently most people got 9s and 45s. Didn't know that. But yes, so they found those two shell cases, and then when they went around to the trunk of the car, opened it, and luckily there was no bodies in the trunk. However, there were two handprints, bloody handprints on the trunk that looked like somebody was inside of the trunk alive trying to push their way out. So they knew that somebody had been in there, but they needed to figure out who it was and where they were now. So they ran the plates and the car came back as being registered to Sue Marshall. So they get her address and go to her house to do a wellness check, because just maybe somebody might have stole her car and she just hadn't reported it stolen yet. Or maybe she let somebody borrow the car and they got into a wreck or got hurt really bad and she had no idea. They didn't know. So they went over to her house to do the wellness check, but when they got there, nobody answered the door. And so that's when they decided to call the family to see if any one of them had seen her. And when they called the family, they told the police the story about them not showing up to the barbecue. And once the police told them that Sue's car had been found, the family reported Sue and Melinda missing. So Eleanor Sue Marshall was born on December 4th, 1956. Now, not much is known about her early life or her childhood, but what is known is that she married a man named John Marshall in 1974 when she was 18 years old. And it's with John that she would have 2 kids, a boy first named Michael, and then about 6 years later, they would welcome a baby girl named Melinda Marshall, who was actually born just 11 days after her mom's birthday on December 15th, 1981. And John and Sue would stay together for about 11 years before they decided to call it quits. And once the two of them split, Sue kind of struggled a little bit being a new single mom, but she made it work. And at some point, she met a man named Jim Gelsing. And there's not a lot of information out there about Jim and Sue's relationship, but what is known is that they were married and divorced. And that's pretty much all I know about their relationship. But in 1993, Sue meets another man named Niels Nielsen, and by September of that same year, the two of them would be married. Now, Niels was a little bit younger than her. He was born on September 12th, 1973, so that made him 17 years younger than Sue. And apparently they had a bit of a whirlwind relationship because they met in 1993 and they was married in that same year. Now, it don't say when they met in 1993, so I really don't know if she met him in January and married him in September. I really don't know. But she did marry him the same year she met him. But what she didn't know about her new husband was that he had a bit of a criminal history, which she actually ended up finding out about after they got married. And as soon as Sue found out about that little piece of criminal history that Niels had, baby, she ran to the courthouse and got that thing annulled, honey. They was only married for 10 days before she was calling it quits because he didn't tell her about his criminal past. And she was like, no, get somebody else to do it. So now that Sue and Melinda missing, the police need to start eliminating suspects. So they go through the family and friends, eliminate all of them as suspects. They check out Melinda's son, Mike, who was 19 years old at this time and away at college. I mean, it was the summertime, but I'm just guessing that he didn't go to college in Wayne City and he went away for college, but just didn't come home for the summer because obviously he wasn't going to play. Or maybe he was doing summer school. Either way, he was away at college when this happened, so he was eliminated as a suspect. So now with close friends and family ruled out, the police needed to start going down the ex-husband list. So they start with Jim Gelsing, and that man was nowhere near Wayne City when the crime happened, so he was ruled out as a suspect. Now, John Marshall, he was near Wayne City. He was actually in Wayne City, but he had an alibi. He had been alibied by his family as being at a barbecue.
Well, I was at a family barbecue.
Now, I know family can lie for you, but I don't think you're going to get everybody at the barbecue to lie for you. So he was alibied out, and then they wanted to know where he was at on July 5th because that's when they found the car. And he was also alibied out on July 5th because he was at work, and he could prove that he was at work. He had, like, you know, clock in, clock out, lunch, all that, all those timestamps. He had all that. So he was ruled out. So now they want to check out Niels Nielsen. Now, when Niels' name comes up as one of Sue's ex-husband, one of the detectives actually realizes that he has heard this name before and he's had dealings with Niels before. So remember when I told y'all that Sue found out about Niels' criminal history shortly after they got married? Well, it was because he had a warrant out of Utah, like the state of Utah wanted him. And she found out about it. And Sue was not here for the foolishness. She ended up turning Niels in, and Detective J.B. Fletcher was the one who went down to his parents' house where he was staying and arrested him and got him sent back to Utah. And he ended up serving 1 year and 4 months in jail. Now, the reason that Utah wanted him in the first place was because back in 1992, he had got busted on theft. And instead of throwing him in jail, they put him on probation. So that meant that he wasn't supposed to leave the state. But if you remember, Sue lives in Wayne City, Illinois. And the only way that he could have met Sue from Utah, because there was no internet then, was to be in Illinois. And so he just disregarded his probation, skipped his little cell phone down to Wayne City, Illinois, and moved in with his mom and his stepdad. So once the Utah authorities realized that homeboy wasn't in Utah no more, they put a warrant out for his arrest. So when he got out of jail, he either wasn't on probation again this time, or he just didn't give a damn about his probation again, because he took his little happy self from Utah back to Illinois, back to living with his mama and his stepdaddy again. And Sue's family and friends told the police that once he moved back, him and Sue started talking again. And with all of this information, the police called Niels and asked him, can he come in for questioning? And he obliges. And on July 6, 1995, Niels walks into that police house, goes into that interview room, and sits down and talks to detectives. He didn't have to be dragged. He didn't have to be pulled, kicking and screaming and fighting. He just walked in voluntarily and sat down with detectives to give his formal interview. And they asked him when was the last time that he has seen Sue. And surprisingly, he tells them that the last time he seen Sue was on the 4th of July. So he pretty much said that on the 4th of July, him, Sue, and Melinda was riding around in Sue's car all day. And then when night fell, they went to watch the fireworks as one would on the 4th of July. And once they left and drove back to his house, the car actually ended up running out of gas, kind of close to his house, to the point where he could kind of push it out of the road and closer towards his house, right? He said that because the car was out of gas, he ended up grabbing a gas can and going to go get some gas for the car. But when he came back, he seen Sue and Melinda talking to a dude in a red car. And eventually, they both got in the car and the car just drove off. So Niels was being super helpful. He gave a description of the guy and everything. He said that it was a white male about 5'10 to 5'11. He had brown hair and a beard with a mustache, and that he was wearing a Harley Davidson shirt. And he said he was able to see all of this from the dome light in the car. So when I heard this, my first thought was, so you just gonna let your woman and her daughter leave with some rando who pulled up to your crib that you don't recognize as a family or a friend and let them just ride off? That don't sound right. That just don't sit well with me. And the police was thinking the same thing, because they were trying to figure out how the hell he saw this man's height when he was sitting in the car the whole time. So the police felt the lies. They felt all of the lies, okay? However, they had to follow up. And so they conducted interviews with pretty much everybody who was around at the time or anywhere near where he said he saw this red car. Like, I guess close to his house. I don't know. Neighbors, something. I don't know. But nobody saw a red car. Nobody. So anyways, he tells his bogus ass story, but he also consents to having his room searched by the police. But just his room. That's the only thing he gives consent for is his room. So while he at the police station lying through his teeth, some other detectives at his house going through his bedroom and talking to his stepdaddy George. And as they talking to George, they ask him, is there any weapons in the house? And George was like, oh yeah, of course there are. So he shows them the couple of guns that he has in the house. And one of them just so happens to be a .32 caliber semi-automatic. And this was interesting to police because remember, they had already found two .32 caliber shell casings in Sue's car. And as they looking at this gun collection that George has, they realize that all of the guns is dusty except for this .32 cal. And they ended up just asking George straight out, like, hey, can we take this gun, back to the lab for testing? And he says yes. So they package up this gun and a box of ammo, and they get ready to take it to the ballistics lab. Because even though they got a couple of pieces of circumstantial evidence and they felt like Niels was lying, they really didn't have nothing to hold him on. And on top of that, they still hadn't found Sue and Melinda. And in an effort to locate them, the police ended up setting up search teams and a command center type of place that was at the community center to collect and share information amongst the search parties. While the police was waiting at the community center, Sue's family would bring them lunch and food and water, stuff just to keep them fed and hydrated because they were very appreciative. And sometimes while the family was there, Niels would ride back and forth, pretty much just taunting the family. He would ride back and forth saying little snarky stuff. He would just his presence was taunting. So one particular day while the family was at the community center, Sue's son Michael decided to step outside for a little bit. And while he was outside, Niels was riding by. And Niels, never missing an opportunity to taunt somebody, he didn't just ride by. He stopped. And Michael wasn't no bitch, so he pressed him. He walked up to Niels' car and started cussing him out. And while he's at Niels' car, he notices a toolbox on the seat. But it's not just any toolbox though. It's Michael's toolbox. So once Niels drives off, Michael go back into the community center and he tells the deputies, like, look, Niels just pulled up and I saw my toolbox in his car. So what the sheriff told him to do was to file a formal police report, because this sheriff, he was smart. He was playing chess, not checkers, with Niels' ass, because they didn't have nothing to hold him on yet. However, the fact that Michael made a formal police report saying that Niels had stole something from him, that gave the police the opportunity to get a search warrant for the whole entire house so that they could find the stolen tools. So on July 8th, they get the search warrant to go to Niels' house. And of course, they find the tools, but they also see some more stuff that can link Niels to Sue and Melinda's disappearance. Because while they was looking for the tools, they saw some of the same, like, what was it? They called it ferning. What is it? I don't know what they called it. I'm sorry. But whatever they called it, it was the same type of wood plank that was used to hold down the gas pedal in Sue's car. But they couldn't really do too much with that just yet. But what they could do was arrest Niels on felony theft charges though. But they couldn't get too happy about that because they could only hold Niels for 48 hours before he would be able to bond out for the felony theft charges. So what they was hoping that they would be able to do was find enough evidence to convict him of Sue and Melinda's murders before he was able to bond out. So the day was coming to an end without very many leads aside from the wood plank at Niels' house. So they was getting ready to wrap it up at the command center when a man came in with 2 teenage boys and said that the boys had been fishing when they seen a duffel bag pop up out the water. And once that duffel bag popped up, a very foul odor filled the air. And so they went to go tell one of the boys' dad, and that's when he brought them down to the police station to let them know what they had found. So the deputies go down to this pond, and it's a pond about 5 miles from where Sue's car was found, and they see this duffel bag, and immediately after seeing the duffel bag, the smell hits them as well. They're able to retrieve the duffel bag, and once they open it, they are looking at decomposed remains, and not just one set, but 2. And so it is believed that this is Sue and Melinda Marshall. However, they gotta wait until the next morning to officially identify them because it was so late in the day that the medical examiner wouldn't be there until the next morning. And so on July 9th, when the ME gets back to the office, the bodies are examined, and it was determined that they had both died from gunshot wounds to the head and that they were both very badly burned after the fact. And the fact that they were so decomposed and so burned, they couldn't identify them just physically. However, they were able to use the teeth to get dental record comparisons. And since they believed that this was Melinda and Sue, that's who they compared the dental records to. And it turns out that it was a match. So they had found Melinda and Sue Marshall. And because the ME said that they had been burned, detectives wanted to go interview Niels' neighbors just to see if they might have seen any type of fire, smoke, anything out of the usual on July 4th or 5th. And one of the neighbors said that they did indeed see a very large fire roaring. He said that it had to have been something really big in that fire in order for it to be as big as it was. And that fire had happened on the 5th. So the detectives bring Niels in again for another interview. And the story that Niels tells them this time is that Sue stole a wallet from some guy and he was pissed about it and then he killed her. So Niels just pretty much kept on lying. So July 10th rolls around and now time is dwindling down before they're gonna have to release Niels, and they need something, anything to be able to charge him. Now, they do got a lot of circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete to say, look, this man did it. So they get a search warrant to search the fire pit at Niels' house, and when they do, oh baby, when they do, they found human teeth, human hair, bones, house keys, car keys, and jewelry. So they collect all of these things and they take the jewelry to Sue and Melinda's family, and the family identifies the jewelry as Melinda's. And so now this puts Sue and Melinda in that fire pit at Niels' home. So they decide to interview Niels again. And they confront him with the evidence from the burn pile. And Niels hit them with the 5-year-old, la 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 la, I can't hear you. I don't want to talk about it no more. So since Niels wasn't giving nothing up or he wasn't talking, they decided to just send him back to the jail. But once Niels got back to the jail, he started talking to one of the guards who he had known prior to him being locked up. Like they knew each other from, you know, the town. So he starts talking to this prison guard and he's telling him like, look, they got the wrong guy. They trying to pay me out to be some type of monster. That's just not me. And this guard had the presence of mind to be like, look, I'm not the person you need to be telling your story to. I'm not the person that can help you. You need to tell that to the investigators. They need to hear your story, not me. And Niels is pretty much like, okay, yeah, I do want my story to be told. So let's go. So the guard gets in contact with the investigators and they take him back to the interview room where Niels tells them a completely different story. He says that he was involved in the cleanup and the cover-up, but he did not commit these murders. Niels said that on the 4th of July, John Marshall pulled up to his house with Melinda and Sue in the car, and he hopped in and they started riding around together. And the four of them was just riding around together when Sue and John had gotten into it about Melinda, because Melinda was supposedly pregnant with John's baby, her dad's child. So they get into this big old fight, and John grabbed Melinda's hair, and Sue tries to get out the car. She tries to escape, but John ended up shooting her, and then he shot Melinda and told Niels that he's involved now. So either you with them or you with me. And so Niels chose to be with John. And the two of them came up with this idea to put the car in the lake, but when it didn't work, Niels panicked, and then he went back for the bodies, burned them, did what he did, and then that was it. But he didn't kill him though. And it was at this point that the police really knew that Niels was on some bullshit, but they had to follow the lead though, because if they didn't, in court, Niels' defense attorneys could use this as a defense saying, did y'all follow all leads? So how y'all know it's not true, right? So they had to cover their asses in that aspect and re-alibi John and put him through another interview and then clear him of all sexual claims against his daughter, which he did clear, by the way. He never took advantage of his daughter in a sexual way at all, ever. And the ME confirmed that Melinda was never pregnant. So, and as detectives are busy clearing John of any wrongdoing, the ballistic test comes back from the gun and all of the bullets that they found throughout this case. And all of them, every last one of them, the ones from the car, the ones retrieved from the bodies, the one that was in the body bag, and the one that was in the burn pit, all were shot from one gun and one gun only. And that gun was the .32 caliber semi-automatic handgun that Niels had access to. And with that, they finally had enough evidence to charge Niels with the murders of Sue and Melinda Marshall. Thank goodness. He never bonded out for that theft charge, and I have a feeling, just a little inkling based off of his history, that he would have left the state of Illinois and they would have had a hard time finding him. But maybe not, because his dumb ass probably would have just went back to Utah. But that's neither here nor there. They didn't even have to chase him because he was still locked up when they got all of this evidence. So once he was charged with the murders, the detective asked him, like, why did you do this? And Niels pretty much told him to fuck off. So nobody ever got a clear answer as to why this happened. But if you ask me, I think it's because Sue turned him in and he wanted his get back. Anyways, Niels' trial started on May 27, 1996, and it was a shit show. He was screaming F-bombs at the judge. He was fighting his defense, like spitting on them, flipping tables, just doing the absolute most. The man really was just cutting up. And whether that played a factor in the jury's decision or not, I don't know. But he was ultimately found guilty of the murders and was sentenced to death. However, in 2003, the governor of Illinois commuted all death sentences to life in prison. And then in 2011, Illinois abolished the death penalty altogether. So Niels is pretty much rotting away in jail right now, as he should. But yeah, y'all, that is all I have for today's case. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all in the next one. Which is a pretty small rural place. Hi, Bailey. So deputies go out to the pond and find a late 90s, no, not 90s, it's 80s. Is it 80s? Yeah. Now Joan, what the fuck? And Detective J.B. Roberts, his name is not Roberts, honey. So with all of the, what is going on with my voice right now? Why is he doing that? Drink some wine, girl. And with all of this information, and with all of this information in hand, on July 6, 1995, the boys pull up on Niels. No, they don't. But yeah, y'all, that is all I have for today.